Paper tearing should never sound like a gunshot. But when Officer Blaine Mercer drove his thumb beneath the thick wax seal of a brown legal envelope handed to him by a quiet woman in an aging Honda, the sound carried the weight of one. Mercer believed he was dealing with a frightened civilian trying to hide behind some strange sovereign citizen argument. He had no idea the document he was destroying belonged to the United States Department of Justice. Not long afterward, 15 armored federal vehicles would barricade the precinct where he worked out. The communications inside the building would go dark, the entrances would be sealed, and heavily armed federal teams would close in from every direction. Mercer would finally understand something he had never expected to learn. He was no longer the man controlling the situation. He had become the man trapped inside it, caught inside a federal operation that had been building long before he ever saw the silver Honda. The humid air around Greater Philadelphia hung heavy over the road, thick enough to make every breath feel slower. Mercer sat behind the wheel of his patrol cruiser, tapping his fingers against the steering wheel, his jaw locked in the same sour expression he seemed to wear through every night shift. She hated working the quiet roads. He hated the lonely stretch of Route 9. Most of all, he hated the feeling that his career had stopped moving. The district where he worked felt forgotten by the people with influence, and Mercer had convinced himself that he deserved more respect, more action, and more authority than anyone around him seemed willing to give. Ahead, a faded silver Honda Civic moved along the road. The car wandered slightly toward the yellow line before correcting. One rear light on the passenger side was damaged, throwing out a harsh white glare instead of the proper red glow. For Mercer, that was enough. Traffic safety was not what interested him. The stop gave him something he wanted far more. It gave him control. He activated the emergency lights. Red and blue strobes flooded the cracked asphalt and flashed across the dark trees lining the road. The Honda responded immediately. The driver did not speed up, did not hesitate, and did not make any attempt to run. The brake lights came on and the car rolled smoothly onto the gravel shoulder. Mercer parked behind it, released his seatbelt, and adjusted the heavy leather duty belt around his waist. He did not get out immediately. He preferred to wait, letting uncertainty build inside the vehicle ahead. To him, the silence was part of the intimidation. When he finally stepped from the cruiser, he moved with a heavy, deliberate swagger. One hand rested near his service weapon. His flashlight was raised high as he approached the driver's side window. The window was already down. Mercer aimed the beam straight into the driver's face, expecting the usual reaction. He expected squinting eyes, trembling hands, a nervous explanation, maybe an apology. Instead, the woman behind the wheel looked directly at him with a gaze that was calm, cold, and completely steady. She was a black woman who appeared to be in her late 30s. Despite the oppressive heat and the poor condition of the Honda, she was dressed with remarkable precision. A tailored charcoal blazer rested over a crisp white blouse. Her posture was perfectly upright. Both hands remained visible on the steering wheel, steady and controlled. "License, registration, and proof of insurance," Mercer barked. "You were drifting back there, and your rear light is out." The woman did not blink against the flashlight. "I wasn't drifting, officer," she said. Her voice was low and carefully measured. There was no panic in it, and no defensive edge. She sounded like someone calmly correcting a fact. "And that light was damaged while the vehicle was parked outside a municipal building earlier. A report has already been filed." "I didn't ask for your life story," Mercer snapped as he stepped closer. "I asked for your documents. Hand them over." Slowly, the woman moved her right hand. She did not reach toward the glove compartment or a purse. Instead, she moved toward the inside pocket of her blazer. Mercer's body tensed. His hand closed around his holster. "Keep your hands where I can see them," he shouted. The woman stopped. For the first time, her expression changed slightly. It was not fear, it was closer to disappointment. Then, using only 2 fingers, she removed a heavy brown legal envelope from inside her blazer and held it through the open window. Mercer snatched it from her hand and shined his flashlight across the front. It was not a driver's license. It was not a registration card. It was not proof of insurance. The envelope was made from thick, high-quality paper. Across the front were the words United States Department of Justice. It stated that the contents were sealed by order of a federal court and warned that opening or tampering with the document could violate Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1519. The back was closed, with a heavy crimson wax seal stamped with a federal eagle. Mercer laughed. He looked back at the woman and let a sneer spread across his face. "What is this garbage? You, one of those sovereign citizen people, you think some fake paper and red wax gets you out of a ticket?" "Officer," the woman said, and her voice dropped into a tone that carried sudden weight. "I strongly advise you to read the outside of that document very carefully. That envelope contains my identification and authorization. You are not permitted to open it. Return it to me, step back to your vehicle, and contact your precinct captain." Mercer's face flushed. "You don't give me orders." The idea that a woman sitting in an old Honda could tell him what to do infuriated him. In his mind, he was the law on that road, and nothing about her calmness made him question himself. It only made him want to prove his authority more forcefully. "I'm going to ask you one last time for your driver's license," Mercer said. "If you don't hand it over, I'm pulling you out of this car and putting you in handcuffs." "That envelope is my identification and my authorization," she replied quietly. "Do not break that seal." The warning should have made him stop. Instead, it fed his ego. Mercer dug his thumb beneath the wax. "Let's see what kind of fake manifesto you've got in here." Hung tore through the heavy paper, snapping the wax seal and ripping the envelope open. The sound was sharp and ugly in the still night. He pulled out a thick stack of documents. The pages were printed on watermarked federal paper. They carried court seals, formal legal language, and signatures from a United States district judge. Mercer barely registered any of it. He skimmed the first page as if the document had already been proven fake, simply because he wanted it to be fake. The woman watched him. Her expression did not shift toward panic. It settled into something more final. "Officer Mercer," she said quietly, reading the name on his uniform, "you just destroyed a sealed federal warrant and interfered with a federal investigation." Mercer stopped. For 1 second, uncertainty reached his face. Then his pride pushed it away. "Step out of the car," he growled as he dropped the torn documents onto the roof of the Honda. "You're under arrest." "On what charge?" she asked. "Failure to provide identification, refusal to obey a lawful order, and producing forged legal documents." Mercer pulled open the driver's door and grabbed her arm. She did not resist. She allowed him to guide her out of the car, turn her around, and press her against the cool metal. Mercer pulled her arms behind her back and locked handcuffs tightly around her wrists. She did not cry out. She did not fight him. "You have no idea what you've just set in motion," she said softly. "Save it for the judge," Mercer replied. He marched her toward the back of his cruiser. He grabbed the torn federal documents from the Honda, crumpled the pages slightly in his grip, and pushed her into the rear seat. When the door slammed shut, Mercer felt a surge of satisfaction. In his mind, he had once again put someone in her place. He did not notice the tiny green light blinking from the pin attached to her blazer. The device was transmitting a silent, encrypted signal through a secure system to a heavily fortified federal command center roughly 30 meters away. While Mercer congratulated himself for making the arrest, people outside his awareness already knew the sealed warrant had been compromised and that the undercover agent carrying it had been taken into custody. The precinct Mercer returned to was an aging brick building that seemed permanently filled with the smell of burned coffee, industrial floor cleaner, and exhaustion. It was the kind of station where careers slowed down, where some officers were counting the days until retirement, while others had simply accepted that they were never leaving. Mercer walked the handcuffed woman through the double doors with his chest pushed forward, making sure everyone could see what he had brought in. Desk Sergeant Calvin Rourke looked up from a crossword puzzle. Rourke had spent decades in law enforcement. His mustache had gone grey, and his face carried the marks of long shifts and too much stale station coffee. "What do we have here, Mercer?" he asked, studying the woman. "She doesn't exactly look like your usual late-night arrest." "Got myself a sovereign citizen," Mercer announced loudly enough for the other officers in the bullpen to hear, pulled her over for a damaged rear light. She refused to identify herself and handed me a pile of fake federal nonsense wrapped in wax. I arrested her for obstruction and forgery, and guided the woman toward a holding cell and locked her inside. Once the handcuffs were removed, she did not rub her wrists or rush to the bars. She simply walked to the bench, sat down, crossed her legs, and stared calmly toward the wall. Mercer returned to Rourke's desk and tossed the torn envelope and federal papers onto the worn wood. "Take a look at this prop," he said. "Sealed federal warrant. These people are getting creative." Rourke picked up the envelope. His fingers moved over the thick paper. He frowned. Over the course of his career, he had handled plenty of fake identification cards and homemade legal documents. Most were printed on cheap paper, filled with obvious mistakes, and covered in strange legal phrases that fell apart after a moment of inspection. This was different. The paper had weight. The seal had detail. The printing was too clean. Rourke raised the torn flap toward the fluorescent light above his desk. The color drained from his face. Deep inside the fibers of the paper was an intricate watermark of the United States Department of Justice seal. Mercer, Rourke said slowly. Where exactly did she get this? I told you. She pulled it out of her jacket and handed it to me like it was the most important thing in the world. Mercer laughed and walked toward the coffee machine. I tore it open right in front of her. Rourke felt sweat forming near his hairline. He carefully pulled out the top document. Across the page were the words United States District Court, Eastern District of Pennsylvania. Then came the title, Warrant for Search, Seizure and Arrest. Rourke read further. The target of the warrant was not a drug house or an organized crime hideout. The target was the 8th District Precinct and the Oakmont County Sheriff's Department. The names listed for immediate detention included Captain Preston Vale, Officer Blaine Mercer, and other personnel on duty. Rourke stared at the document. Mercer, he whispered, you tore this open. Mercer took a drink of coffee and made a face at the bitter taste. Yeah, it's fake, Calvin. It's not fake. The voice came from the hallway. Captain Preston Vale stepped out of his office. Vale was lean, sharp-eyed, and known throughout the district as a man who preferred his own rules. Over the years, he had built a comfortable little kingdom inside the precinct, one protected by loyalty, fear, and silence. Officers around him understood that assignments, protection, and advancement could depend on staying in his favor. That was why the sudden terror on his face mattered. Mercer had never seen the captain look uncertain before. Vale was usually the man who made everyone else nervous. He walked directly to Rourke's desk and took the papers from his hands. As he read, his face changed. The arrogance disappeared first, then the color. Who is she? Vale demanded, looking toward the holding cell. I don't know, Mercer said. She wouldn't give me her identification. By then, even Mercer could feel that the room had changed. Vale stepped directly into his space. You arrogant fool, he hissed. Look at the bottom of the page. Mercer leaned in. The executing officer listed on the warrant was Special Agent in Charge Simone Archer, Department of Justice, Office of the Inspector General, Anti-Corruption Task Force. Mercer's eyes moved toward the holding cell. The woman sat exactly as before. Then the precinct went silent, not gradually. Instantly, the hum from the cooling system stopped. The ordinary static from police radios died at the same moment. One officer lifted his radio and stared at it. Mine just went dead. Another checked his. Same here. Rourke, check dispatch, Vale ordered. Rourke turned toward the computer monitors. He clicked through the precinct's computer-aided dispatch system, but the screen stopped responding. Then every monitor went black. A moment later, they came back with a single image. The seal of the Department of Justice filled the screen against a blue background. A digital progress bar moved steadily across the display until it was full. Then bold white text appeared. Network seized under federal warrant. All communications disabled. Do not attempt to reboot. Rourke stared. We're locked out, he said. Phones, internet, radios, dispatch, everything. Vale ran toward the front doors. He pushed against them. They did not move. He shoved harder and threw his shoulder against the frame. The building's electronic magnetic locks had engaged. They were trapped inside. The overhead lights flickered and went out. Darkness swallowed the precinct. Then, emergency lighting came on, covering the bullpen in a dim red glow. In the sudden quiet, another sound made every officer turn. A dedicated federal liaison telephone on Vale's desk had started ringing. It had not rung in years. The old mechanical bell seemed impossibly loud. Vale walked toward it. The phone kept ringing. He picked up the receiver with a shaking hand. Captain Preston Vale speaking. A deep voice answered. This is Supervisory Deputy Marshal Gideon Cross. Your precinct is currently surrounded by heavily armed federal agents. We have secured your network and sealed your building. On what grounds? Vale demanded, forcing strength into his voice. You cannot surround a local police station like this. We can, and we have, Cross replied. Officer Blaine Mercer destroyed a sealed federal warrant and unlawfully detained a federal agent. That action triggered the operation. Vale said nothing. You have a very short window to place every weapon on the floor open the entrance, and surrender. If you refuse, federal personnel will enter the building, and anyone holding a firearm while we recover a detained federal official may be treated as an armed threat. Do you understand? The call ended. Vale slowly lowered the receiver. Mercer stood near the coffee machine completely still. His face had gone pale. His cup had fallen to the floor and shattered. Inside the holding cell, Simone Archer rose from the bench. She walked to the bars, wrapped her fingers around the steel, and looked at Mercer with the smallest, coldest smile. Then everyone felt a low vibration through the floor. Heavy diesel engines were idling outside. "What is happening?" Mercer demanded. "Who was that?" "Shut up," Vale snapped. He looked around the bullpen. Some officers had hands near their holsters. Others were moving away from the windows. "Everybody listen to me," Vale said. "Do exactly what I say. Unbuckle your gun belts. Put them on the floor. Step away from them." "Captain, we can't just disarm," one officer protested. "We don't even know what is outside." "Drop your weapons," Vale shouted. "If you reach for a gun when they come through those doors, you could get yourself killed. Do it now." Slowly, the officers began removing their duty belts. Weapons, magazines, radios, and batons hit the linoleum floor. Vale removed his own sidearm, set it on his desk, and stepped back. Outside, boots struck pavement in disciplined rhythm. The metallic sounds of rifles being prepared carried through the walls. Bright, white, tactical lights flooded through the high windows, overpowering the red emergency lighting. "The doors are electronically locked," Rourke said, raising his hands instinctively. "They'll open them," Vale muttered. A deafening impact shook the building. The heavy entrance doors bent inward. A second impact tore the magnetic locks away from the frames. The doors flew open, through dust and fragments from the damaged entrance. Federal tactical teams moved inside. They were not local tactical officers. Men and women in heavy tactical gear entered with synchronized precision. Protective helmets covered their heads. Ballistic plates covered their torsos. Across their uniforms, bold yellow letters identified them as United States Marshals. At least 20 marshals poured through the lobby and into the bullpen, rifles raised and controlled. Their movement was fast but disciplined, each person covering a defined angle as the team took control of the room. The officers who had spent years assuming the precinct walls protected them now watched federal personnel occupy those same walls in seconds. Red laser points moved across the room and settled on several officers, including Mercer. "Hands in the air," a voice ordered. "Interlock your fingers behind your heads. Do it now." Every officer obeyed. They dropped to their knees and laced their hands behind their heads. Then Supervisory Deputy Marshal Gideon Cross entered. He was a large, imposing man wearing a tactical vest over a dress shirt. A gold badge hung from a chain around his neck. His eyes moved across the room, taking in every detail before settling on the torn envelope and crumpled warrant on Rourke's desk. Cross walked toward it. The precinct was silent, except for the breathing of frightened officers. The same bullpen that had been filled with jokes, coffee, radio chatter, and Mercer's boasting now felt completely different. Every person in the room understood that the federal team was recording the scene, securing evidence, and treating the building itself as part of an active criminal investigation. Cross pulled black gloves from a pocket, put them on, and carefully lifted the destroyed envelope and damaged federal papers. He handled the torn pieces with the kind of care Mercer had refused to show on the roadside. To the marshals, the damaged paper was not a prop or a challenge to someone's pride. It was evidence. "Who destroyed this document?" Cross asked. No one answered. Vale stared at the floor. "I will not ask twice." Cross began placing the torn paper into a clear evidence bag. Then Simone Archer's voice came from the holding cell. "Officer Blaine Mercer did it. Marshal Cross. He's kneeling near the coffee machine." Cross turned immediately. Several rifle sights shifted toward Mercer. Mercer swallowed. "Listen," he said quickly. "She wouldn't identify herself. She gave me a thick envelope sealed with red wax in the middle of a traffic stop. People hand us fake sovereign citizen papers all the time. I didn't know it was real. It was a mistake." Cross walked toward him. "A mistake," he repeated. He stopped in front of Mercer. "Officer Mercer, that Honda was deliberately placed in your patrol sector as part of a federal operation. The driver handed you a document sealed under federal authority. Instead of following procedure, you decided that your own assumptions mattered more than the warning printed in front of you. You destroyed federal property and arrested an undercover federal agent." Cross leaned closer. "But understand something. We did not come here because you tore a piece of paper. We came here because you, Captain Vale, and multiple officers in this building have been operating an extortion scheme along Route 9 for years. Commercial truck drivers were stopped, pressured for money, evidence was falsified, and proceeds were moved through a shell company in Delaware. Mercer's eyes widened. He looked toward Vale. Vale stared at the floor. Agent Archer has been reviewing this precinct's financial records for months, Cross continued. The investigation had already uncovered enough evidence to support indictments. What the task force still needed was unmistakable proof of deliberate corruption, a clear willingness to ignore lawful authority, and conduct that would strengthen the broader racketeer-influenced and corrupt organizations' act case. The traffic stop was never designed to invent wrongdoing. It was designed to give the people already under investigation a lawful choice and record what they did with it. Cross gestured toward the cell. So we set a trap. Agent Archer entered your patrol area carrying the sealed federal warrant authorizing this operation. 2 marshals opened the holding cell. Simone stepped out. She adjusted her charcoal blazer as calmly as if she had just walked out of a meeting rather than a jail cell surrounded by tactical officers. Then she walked toward Mercer. I warned you, she said quietly. You had no idea what you were setting in motion. You set me up, Mercer whispered. You wanted me to tear it. I handed you an envelope, Simone replied. Your ego did everything else. You could not accept the possibility that the person you stopped might have authority you did not understand. You needed to prove that you were in control, and that choice added obstruction of a federal investigation to the charges already waiting for you. She turned toward Cross. Marshal, the precinct is secure. You have the floor. Cross faced the kneeling officers. Captain Preston Vale, Officer Blaine Mercer, and every individual named in the warrant. You are under federal arrest for racketeering, extortion, wire fraud, and destruction of federal evidence. You are no longer acting as law enforcement officers. You are federal detainees. Marshals moved through the room. Handcuffs closed. Plastic restraints tightened. Mercer was pulled to his feet by 2 deputies and secured with his hands behind his back, much the way he had restrained Simone on the roadside. As he was led toward the damaged entrance of his own precinct, he looked back. Federal agents had already begun dismantling the station piece by piece. Desks were being searched, hard drives were being collected, documents were being photographed and secured. In the center of the activity stood Simone Archer, reviewing information on a tablet. The torn wax-sealed envelope sat protected inside an evidence bag beside her. Only then did Mercer fully understand. What he had believed was an ordinary traffic stop had actually been the final trigger in a federal operation, and he had walked directly into it because he could not control his own pride. At the Philadelphia field office of the Federal Bureau of Investigation, the interrogation room felt almost unnaturally quiet compared with the chaos of the precinct. The walls were stark white. The stainless steel table was bolted to the floor. Mercer sat with one wrist secured to a heavy metal ring built into the table. He stared at the mirrored glass across from him. The swagger from Route 9 was gone. The door opened. Simone Archer entered carrying a thick manila folder. She had changed out of the charcoal blazer and into dark, tactical clothing. A holstered service pistol rested at her side. She sat across from Mercer and placed the folder on the table. For a while, she said nothing. She simply watched him. I want a lawyer, Mercer finally said, his voice rough. You already have one, Simone replied. A federal public defender named Thomas Gallagher is reviewing the 34-page indictment prepared against you. He advised you to remain silent. That is your right, and no one is taking it away from you. But I think you understand why the people above you would benefit most if you say nothing about how the money moved, who gave the orders, and who protected the operation. Mercer's eyes moved toward the folder. I didn't know about any racket, he said. I just wrote tickets. Vale told me where to patrol. Simone opened the folder and slid a large photograph across the table. It showed Mercer out of uniform in the shadowed loading area of a warehouse in South Philadelphia. He was accepting a thick brown paper bag from a man wearing a greasy mechanic's jacket. On one documented occasion, you accepted $12,000 in cash from a driver working for Keystone Logistics, Simone said. Soon afterward, $4,000 appeared in your personal account. The remaining $8,000 moved into a Delaware shell company managed by Captain Vale's brother-in-law. Mercer's breathing changed. He stared at the photograph. "We have the bank records," Simone continued. "We have wire recordings. We have dashboard video showing you repeatedly stopping commercial freight trucks, disabling your body camera, and conducting unlawful searches until drivers agreed to pay so-called civil forfeiture fees on the roadside to prevent their cargo from being impounded. The investigation showed the same pattern again and again. The stop would begin with an ordinary traffic justification. The camera would stop recording at a convenient moment. The search would become more aggressive, and the driver would eventually be offered a way to leave only after money changed hands. "Vale made us do it," Mercer whispered. "The betrayal came quickly once he realized how much evidence existed. He said if we didn't cooperate, he would transfer us to the worst assignments in the city. He said we'd end up working dangerous areas without support." "Captain Vale is sitting in another room inside this building," Simone replied. "Marshal Cross is speaking with him." She leaned forward. "But there is a problem. Vale is not talking, and he is not afraid of us." Mercer looked up. "Your captain is greedy," Simone said, "but he is not the person at the top. A precinct captain does not run a multi-million-dollar extortion operation along a major highway for years without someone inside the courthouse protecting him." Mercer's expression tightened. "Vale is sending money upward, and whoever receives that money is powerful enough to make sure Vale never reaches a courtroom if he becomes a threat." Mercer's hands began to shake. "If I tell you who it is, they'll come after me too." "If you do not help us," Simone replied, "you will enter federal custody as a corrupt former officer who stole money connected to dangerous transport networks. You need to understand what that means for your safety. The people above you are already deciding which lower-level participants they can abandon. Vale is afraid because he knows the same organization that protected him can decide he is more useful silent than alive." Mercer stared at her. She was offering him a path forward, but it came with no comfort. "It wasn't only cash," he said. Simon waited. Vale kept an insurance policy. He knew the person above him would eventually turn on him. He kept a ledger. "Where?" "I don't know the exact place," Mercer said quickly, "but Rourke knows. The desk sergeant, Rourke, handled the deposits. He knows where Vale hid it." Simon closed the folder. "If you're lying to me, Mercer, destroying that warrant will be the least of your problems." Back at the 8th District Precinct, the wild energy of the raid had turned into careful forensic work. Federal accountants and evidence teams moved through the bullpen, cataloging paperwork, securing computer drives, photographing offices, and opening locked cabinets. Every drawer was treated as potentially important. Every storage device was tagged. Every financial record was preserved. The federal teams were not searching randomly. They were dismantling the precinct's internal operation carefully enough that the evidence could survive courtroom scrutiny later. Agent Adrian Knox, a veteran investigator from the Department of Justice Financial Crimes Unit, crouched beside Calvin Rourke's large wooden desk. Following the information passed along from Mercer's interview, Knox ran his hands beneath the heavy oak panels. He stopped. "I found something." Simone entered through the damaged front doorway as pale daylight spilled across the debris. Knox used a small pry tool to loosen a false wooden panel behind the central drawer. Inside the hollow space was a vacuum-sealed plastic package. He removed it carefully and opened the wrapping. Inside sat a small black leather notebook and a brass safe deposit box key. The keys carried a 4-digit identification number and the logo of Liberty Trust Financial. Knox opened the notebook. His eyes widened as he scanned the handwritten columns. "Agent Archer, you need to see this. The trucker extortion money is only part of it." Simone took the ledger. Page after page contained dates, badge identifiers, initials, and monetary amounts. But the margins contained something even more important. Names, city council members, prominent business leaders, civil court judges. Simon's expression darkened. "Vale wasn't just collecting money from truckers," she said. "He was gathering leverage." Knox looked over her shoulder. "Whenever his officers stopped someone influential and discovered something compromising, they did not always make an arrest," Simone continued. "A judge suspected of driving under the influence, a politician caught in a compromising personal situation, a corporate executive carrying illegal narcotics. The officers could bury the report, preserve the evidence, and turn the person into someone who owed them." "Blackmail," Knox said. "Vale was using secrets to purchase political protection," Simone replied. She turned to the final page. One entry was circled in red ink. The initials were Duar. Beside them was a monthly payment of $50,000. Who's Duar? Knox asked. Simone looked up. Everett Crane, the district attorney. The meaning of the discovery settled over the room. If District Attorney Everett Crane was at the top of the scheme, then corruption reached into the local justice system itself. The ledger suggested that the precinct had not merely been stealing from drivers, it had been collecting secrets powerful enough to control people who should have been overseeing the law. Warrants, dismissals, prosecutions, civil decisions, and convictions from the years covered by the operation could all be called into question. Every case touched by the same officials would now have to be viewed through the possibility that money, blackmail, or political protection had influenced what happened. Simone pulled out an encrypted phone and contacted Gideon Cross. Gideon, move Vale into protected isolation immediately. Do not allow local corrections staff near him. The cover extends into the district attorney's office. Everett Crane is at the top. Cross answered at once. Understood, but we have another problem. Rourke has requested counsel, and the attorney who arrived is Warren Bellamy, Crane's personal defense lawyer and one of the city's most effective fixers. Simone closed her eyes for a second. Crane already knows the precinct is gone. Cross continued. He knows we have Vale, and he knows we're tearing through the station. He's going to try to silence weak links and destroy whatever evidence remains. We need that safe deposit box at Liberty Trust before anyone empties it. Simone said, if Vale kept the ledger here, the photographs, recordings, and other blackmail material are probably in that vault. Get a federal judge to issue a seizure order. We bypass the local courts completely. Soon afterward, federal vehicles arrived outside the tall glass building of Liberty Trust Financial in downtown Philadelphia. Simone entered with armed marshals and displayed her federal credentials to the bank manager. Federal warrant, she said. We need access to the private vault immediately. The manager, visibly shaken, led them downstairs. As they approached the secure vault area, Simone stopped. A security guard was slumped over his desk, unconscious. Weapons ready, Simone said quietly. The team moved into the vault corridor with controlled precision. At the far end, a man in a grey suit was urgently pulling folders and portable computer drives from an open safe deposit box and stuffing them into a black duffel bag. Federal agents, Simone shouted. Drop the bag and place your hands on your head. The man froze. The duffel bag dropped. When he turned around, Simone recognized him immediately. I was not a street criminal or a hired outsider. I was Assistant District Attorney Nolan Pierce, Everett Crane's closest lieutenant. Pierce's arrest inside the bank vault sent shockwaves through the city's political circles. A senior prosecutor had been found inside a private vault trying to remove material connected to an active federal corruption case. To people who had spent years believing the district attorney's office was insulated from consequences, the arrest was an unmistakable warning that the investigation had moved beyond street-level officers. But Simone knew it still was not enough. Pierce was loyal. He could take the blame to protect Crane. The federal team now had the blackmail material, the ledger, and the corrupt officers, but connecting the entire operation directly to Crane, beyond reasonable doubt, required stronger evidence from inside the organization. And Crane was already trying to erase the trail. Inside the federal holding facility, Preston Vale paced through his isolation cell. I knew what Crane was capable of. He also knew that political power and money could reach farther than concrete walls if the wrong person had been bought. Later, a food tray was pushed through the slot in Vale's door. The person delivering it was not one of the regular federal deputies. He was a county corrections officer, temporarily helping with the sudden increase in detainees. His name was Trevor Cobb. Vale looked at the tray. I was hungry, but something inside him told him not to touch it. Then he glanced toward the security camera in the corner. The small indicator, showing that it was recording, was dark. Vale stepped away from the food. His heartbeat quickened. He looked through the narrow reinforced window in the door. Cobb was still standing there, watching, waiting. Suddenly, the outer door to the cell block opened. Gideon Cross moved fast. He grabbed Cobb by the back of the uniform and forced him against the wall while other marshals secured the officer's hands. Don't move, Cross ordered. Simone entered holding a tablet. She stopped in front of Vale's cell and looked at the untouched tray. Agent Archer, Vale said, pressing closer to the window. He was trying to kill me. We know, Simone replied. She looked toward Cobb. We have been monitoring his financial activity. A payment of $50,000 was recently transferred into an offshore account connected to his wife. The authorization came from a private server associated with District Attorney Everett Crane's home. Simon unlocked the cell and stepped inside. "Crane just tried to have you killed inside a federal facility, Preston. He does not intend to save you. He intends to erase you." Vale looked at the food. Then he looked at Cobb being taken away in handcuffs. The last trace of loyalty drained from his face. "What do you need me to do?" he asked. Simon's expression became cold and focused. "Make a phone call." Inside a secure communications room, Vale sat with a headset while federal technicians prepared to trace the connection. They did not call Crane through his official number. Vale dialed a private burner number reserved for emergencies inside the organization. After several rings, a smooth voice answered. "I told you never to call this number." "Everett, it's Vale." There was a pause. "I need help. The federal agents have me in isolation, but I found a way to get access to a phone." Another pause. "Preston, I heard you were compromised. I heard you lost the ledger." "I didn't lose everything," Vale said, following a script Simone had placed in front of him. "The federal agents hit the bank, but Pierce made a mistake. He grabbed the decoy material. The real drives, the ones with the mayor's photographs and your offshore routing information, are still hidden." Simone watched the tracing display begin narrowing toward a cell tower in the wealthy suburbs. "Where are they?" Crane asked. "I buried them in a lockbox at the shipyard. But I'm not giving you anything unless you guarantee my family's safety and get me a lawyer I can trust." Crane's voice changed. "Where is the box, Preston?" "Pier 42. Container 8804. The lock code is your birth year. You have until the end of the night to get my family out of the city, or I give the location to Agent Archer." Vale ended the call. Simone placed one hand on his shoulder. "Good work." Then she turned toward Cross. "Crane cannot trust a subordinate with this. If he believes those drives contain enough evidence to destroy him, he will go to the shipyard himself." Cross checked his rifle. "Then, let's catch a district attorney." The trap was ready. The man who had preyed on the city for years was about to walk into a federal operation built around the fear of his own secrets. Fog rolled in from the Delaware River, carrying the smell of brackish water, diesel fuel, and old rust. Pier 42 was filled with aging shipping containers stacked high above narrow lanes. The metal corridors formed a maze of dark passageways. 30 heavily armed federal agents waited silently throughout the area. They were hidden between shipping containers, behind pallets, and along the narrow lanes, each position chosen so Crane could enter the trap without seeing the perimeter close around him. No one spoke above a whisper. The operation depended on letting him believe the shipyard was empty. Simone crouched behind wooden pallets with tactical gear covering her body. Gideon Cross stood nearby, watching the entrance through thermal optics. "Vehicle approaching," Cross said quietly over the encrypted radio. "No headlights." A dark grey Ford Taurus rolled into the yard. The vehicle passed through the security entrance. The marshals had intentionally left accessible and moved slowly toward the center of the shipyard. It stopped near a tall wall of blue and rust-colored containers. The driver's door opened. District Attorney Everett Crane stepped out. Crane was a man more comfortable in tailored Italian suits, spotless courthouse corridors, private clubs, and climate-controlled offices. Here, wearing an expensive trench coat and leather shoes that sank into wet gravel, he looked completely removed from his usual world. But fear had brought him there. He pulled out a powerful flashlight and moved along the containers, scanning painted identification numbers until he reached container 8804. Attached to the locking bar was a heavy steel lockbox secured by a brass combination padlock. Crane's hands shook, his breath clouded in the cold air. He entered his birth year into the lock. The padlock opened. Crane released a rough breath and threw the lock aside. He opened the steel box and aimed the flashlight inside, expecting to find the drives that could preserve his freedom. The box was empty, except for a single sheet of heavy paper carrying the seal of the United States Department of Justice. Crane picked it up. Across the page was a reference to Title 18 of the United States Code, Section 1519, Destruction of Evidence. Beneath it was a simple message: the same offense that helped bring your empire down. Crane barely had time to understand. The shipyard exploded with light. High-intensity tactical floodlights came on from multiple directions, turning the fog into a glowing white wall. Crane dropped the paper and raised his hands to shield his eyes. He stumbled backward until his body struck the steel side of the container. "Everett Crane," Cross called through a loudspeaker. "Keep your hands exactly where they are. You are surrounded by United States Marshals." Federal agents emerged through the fog. Laser sights converged on Crane's chest. Simone stepped forward into the floodlights and walked toward him. Crane squinted at her, trying to summon the authority that had carried him through years of courtrooms and political meetings. "Do you have any idea who I am?" he shouted. "I am the district attorney of this county. This is an illegal ambush. I will have every one of your badges. I will bury you in federal court." "You are not going into court as a prosecutor anymore, Mr. Crane," Simone replied. "You are going as a defendant." "On what grounds?" Crane demanded. "You have nothing but a staged phone call from a disgraced police captain. That is entrapment." Simone took a digital recorder from her jacket and activated it. Cobb's recorded statement played through the quiet shipyard. "And told me to do it. Crane's people transferred $50,000 to an offshore account for my wife. They said if Vale ate the food, my family would be taken care of. I only had to make sure the camera was off." Crane's face went pale. The arrogance left him. "We did not build this case on one phone call, Everett," Simone said. "The call forced you to act because you believed the blackmail evidence existed. The attempted killing of a federal witness inside a federal facility is separate evidence. We seized the digital logs tied to your private server. We have the transfer records. We have Cobb. We have the ledger, the bank material, and the witnesses." Crane stared at her. His chest rose and fell quickly. The certainty that he had been outmaneuvered finally settled over him. Then he tried one last bargain. "I can give you the mayor," he whispered. "I can give you 3 state senators. I have records. I have offshore accounts and information on people far above the officers you arrested. Give me immunity and I'll hand you the entire network." Simone's expression did not change. The Department of Justice does not give the leader of the organization immunity just to catch the people beneath him. She looked toward Cross. "Marshal Cross, take him into custody." 2 deputies moved forward. Crane was turned toward the steel container and handcuffed. The metallic click of the restraints carried through the damp air. For a man whose influence had once controlled prosecutors, police officers, political favors, and secrets, it was the sound of that power disappearing. Elsewhere in federal detention, Blaine Mercer sat alone inside a Stark cell. He lay on the narrow mattress and stared at the ceiling while doors opened and closed somewhere down the block. A guard walked past carrying a portable radio. A breaking news report was playing through the small speaker. The district attorney had been arrested by United States Marshals at the Delaware River waterfront. The arrest followed the federal takeover of the 8th District Precinct, and Department of Justice officials had unsealed a sweeping indictment under the Racketeer Influenced and Corrupt Organizations Act. The report described a multi-million-dollar extortion scheme, a blackmail network reaching into powerful offices, and federal evidence linking local law enforcement misconduct to officials who had once seemed untouchable. Mercer slowly sat up. The scale of the destruction finally became clear. The investigation had uncovered a multi-million-dollar extortion operation, a system of political blackmail, compromised law enforcement officers, and a corrupt network that had operated in the shadows for years. Commercial drivers had been shaken down, reports had been manipulated, evidence had been hidden. Powerful people had been protected when their secrets were useful, and those same secrets had been turned into leverage. What had looked from the outside like an ordinary local precinct had been functioning as one piece of a much larger criminal structure. And the final chain of events had accelerated because of one reckless decision. Mercer had needed to prove that he was the most powerful person on a dark stretch of Route 9. His ego could not tolerate a quiet woman in an old Honda telling him that there were limits to his authority. So he tore open the envelope. Now, the sound of that paper ripping followed him in the silence. Mercer buried his face in his hands as another reality settled over him. The federal case exposed him to a sentence measured in decades, and he understood that a 30-year federal sentence was no longer an abstract threat used by prosecutors. It was a possibility hanging over the rest of his life. The confidence he had carried onto Route 9 could not help him now. Neither could his badge, his captain, or the network that had once made him feel protected. What began as an ego-driven traffic stop became the spark that exposed an entire corruption network. The torn federal warrant did not create the corruption. It revealed the character of the people already participating in it. Mercer did not suddenly become reckless on that roadside. He had spent years making choices that taught him to confuse authority with superiority, fear with respect, and obedience with justice. Captain Preston Vale made similar choices. He built protection through money, secrecy, and intimidation, believing that enough powerful friends could make consequences disappear. Calvin Rourke helped move the money. Nolan Pierce tried to destroy evidence. Trevor Cobb accepted payment to harm a federal witness. Everett Crane used public office as a shield for an organization built on extortion and blackmail. None of those choices happened all at once. That's what makes the lesson more important. People rarely wake up one morning and decide to destroy everything they have built. More often, they cross small lines first. They ignore one rule because it is convenient. They look away from one wrong because speaking up feels uncomfortable. They accept one favor, tell one lie, misuse authority once, and then convince themselves the next step is not much worse. Eventually, those small compromises become a way of living. And once that happens, pride can become more dangerous than fear. Simon Archer's strength came from the opposite direction. She did not need to scream at Mercer to prove who she was. She did not need to insult him, threaten him, or fight him on the roadside. She warned him clearly. She stayed calm. She trusted the evidence, the operation, and the lawful process already in motion. Her composure did not make her weak. It made her difficult to manipulate. Real strength often looks like that. It can be quiet. It can be patient. It can mean refusing to let another person's arrogance decide who you become in the moment. Justice also does not mean enjoying another person's downfall. The deepest purpose of accountability is not revenge. It is protection. It is making sure that people who misuse power can no longer keep harming others. It is reopening doors that corruption tried to close. It is restoring trust where possible, correcting wrongful decisions, and reminding institutions that authority must always answer to responsibility. The story also leaves room for another truth. Every person involved had a choice. Mercer could have raided the envelope and called his captain. Vale could have refused to build an extortion network. Rourke could have stopped handling dirty money. Pierce could have walked away instead of protecting powerful people. Cobb could have refused a payment. Crane could have used his office to serve the public rather than himself. At many points, someone could have chosen differently. That matters because most of life's biggest consequences begin with ordinary decisions. Very few people will ever stand inside a surrounded police precinct or walk through a foggy shipyard toward a federal trap. But everyone will eventually face moments where pride, fear, money, anger, loyalty, or kindness pull in different directions. In those moments, character is usually revealed quietly. It is revealed when no one seems to be watching. It is revealed in whether we listen before judging, whether we tell the truth when lying would be easier, whether we use power carefully, and whether we accept responsibility when we have caused harm. Forgiveness can still exist alongside accountability. Compassion does not require pretending that harmful choices had no consequences. A second chance has value only when it is connected to honesty, responsibility, and a real willingness to change. And living with integrity is not about never making mistakes. It is about refusing to let ego turn a mistake into a pattern. Sometimes justice arrives through a courtroom. Sometimes it begins with a ledger hidden inside a desk, a frightened witness who decides to speak, or an investigator who refuses to stop following the evidence. And sometimes it arrives in an old Honda carrying a woman who already knows exactly how the night is going to end if arrogance chooses the wrong path. If this story of corruption, betrayal, accountability, and federal justice held your attention, share it with someone who believes power should always come with responsibility. And subscribe for more stories about courage, consequences, second chances, and the quiet choices that can change everything.